by arguing. You argue the topics. Now, if you have forgotten how to argue, I suggest you just hang out with a 13-year-old girl for a short period of time, because they know how to do this. And this is how they do it. They say, "Now, Mom, what you said is not quite true because of this, 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 and this. And what I said actually is the case because of this, this, and this. And therefore," using impeccable logic, "you should let me go to the mall with my friends tomorrow." Right? So they will try to lead you to the conclusion by discredit the con, and that's what you're doing here. You discredit the con, and you reaffirm the pro. So in the conclusion, you basically say, well, what I said up here about janitorial problems really isn't significant. And what I did say down here about dental health is going to make a huge difference. Right? So you restate the topics, argue, and reaffirm the pro. That's the persuasive model. That's the persuasive essay model as it was taught to me by Dr. Webster. And it may not work in an academic setting, because in an academic setting, they want more of a thesis. They want you to say how you're going to argue, and then they will judge how well you supported the argument. But in the real world, persuasive rhetoric often does this. You'll start reading an article, not quite sure where it's going. And once you read a certain ways in, guess what? You're hooked. Did you ever notice that? If you read something about halfway, you'll read to the end. Whether you really like it or not, you'll keep reading. And so this is a very, very effective one. And so you see then that wherever a student is, you see the pathway. The pathway towards developing the essayist. You take the next step. Now we're going to talk quite a bit more in the next unit about writing from literature, because it is an academic need that most students have. Many teachers have various ways to teach literature, literary analysis, and all that. So we'll expand on this before we finish the whole course. But if you have the picture of where you're going, I think it all makes sense. And you know, Dr. Webster, after he retired in Vancouver, he taught for a while. He tutored some wealthy Chinese students who were trying to get into the better universities in Vancouver and British Columbia. And these were very intelligent kids whose English was their second language, and he was teaching them structure and style in writing, right? And we're talking, 10th, 11th, 12th grade. You know what he would do? He would always start them with a country essay, because the facts are easy to get, the topics can be organized and presented, he can teach the structure and style, there's nothing too tricky, right? Then he would move to a person, and he would have them write about a person as a second essay, because, again, pretty easy to organize. But they would master that model and those techniques. Then he would move into historical analysis or current issue analysis. Do you see? So even at the higher level, even if you're teaching 12th grade, there could be benefit in doing a more basic essay just to teach structure, style, process before you get into something that the information gets technical and confusing and difficult, right? So we have several examples. I'd like to read one with you just because it is so charming. Turn to page 131. And this is a grade 5 student from Canada who went to a school that used the structure and style program every grade level. So she has done this for 2 or 3 years, grade 5, and this particular essay has all the elements that we've talked about, and so I think you will recognize it, and it's short and it's sweet and cute. So, Captivating, Convincing, Comical Cartoons by Caroline. It's nice, her name just fit right in with the alliteration there. Have you ever laughed, giggled, or chuckled at a cartoon? What's that? Her attempt at the attention getter? If so, you may have just read some of the world's most celebrated cartoons. Cartoons have a great variety of uses. That's topic 1, see it bolded. Throughout the enormous earth exist humorous cartoonists. That's the second topic. Undeniably, there are many cartoonists, but Charles Schulz stands out. And there's the third, right? Cartoons, which are used universally, have numerous purposes. Many cartoon characters make funny but wise statements. Essentially, most cartoons are developed for entertainment. Although cartoons are published mainly for amusement, some, such as political cartoons, send serious statements. Cartoons make you think. They enlighten you. They challenge. What technique is that? The 3 SSS, the short staccato sentences, right? In some countries, comics have negative uses, such as propaganda. Positively, cartoons may be used to spread good news. Communicating ideas is key use of cartoons. Now, I just want to point out, it says for sick. Do you see that? Sick means as the student did it, as it was originally done. And she marked it a 4 because of communicating. Looks like an ing opener. You know, though, it's a what? It's a gerund. It's an imposter. It should be a 1. But grade 5, who's going to stumble over that, right? Across the enormous earth exist only a few cartoonists who remain renowned. Possibly Charles Schulz is the most famous cartoonist in recent years. Now that sentence is perhaps misplaced, would go better at the end of the paragraph. Why? The next paragraph is all about him. But Johnny Hart makes simple but profound statements about life with his comic strip, BC. Although weird and bizarre, Gary Larson conveys intelligent messages in his highly acclaimed The Far Side. Turning everyday life into comedy is what Lynn Johnson's For Better For Worse excels at, while Bill Keene's Family Circus is superior at capturing the innocence of children. Who is better at revealing selfishness, sarcasm, and cynicism as Jim Davis Garfield? Although few comical artists have succeeded, they have widely impacted our thinking. Now, where is this student, who's probably about 10 or 11 years old, getting her information? Look at the bottom. World Book Encyclopedia. See, it's not her opinion that Jim Davis Garfield reveals selfishness, cynicism, and sarcasm. 10-year-olds probably aren't going to think that way. That's the World Book saying this is what Jim Garfield did, right? But that's okay. She's reporting the facts. Focusing on Charles Schulz, who is an amazing cartoonist, helps people comprehend the usefulness of cartoons. Charles Schulz based the main character, Charlie Brown, on himself. Unsurprisingly, Schulz did poorly academically because he skipped 2 grades. That doesn't make any sense to me. Although he was barely recognized when he first started his drawing career, he continued. After many years of devoted work, Peanuts became extremely popular. How persistent? Now, technically, that's not a very short sentence because there's no verb. It's an interjection or exclamation. Peanuts is an exceptional example of a cartoon which is funny and wise in different ways. Charles Schulz is a superb picture of a cartoonist who succeeded. Cartoons have multiple uses, representing numerous devoted humorists, with the illustrious Charles Schulz in the lead. Okay, so she reiterated the 3 topics, and we have the kids do that, put in bold or highlight the topics that they're introducing in the introduction and the topics that they have discussed in the conclusion, and so you see that marked out. To many young readers, merriment is the most enjoyable aspect of cartoons. That's her statement right there. The most merriment. Cartoons can be convincing. They're comical. Cartoons captivate. Pretty good, wouldn't you say? I mean, if you've got a 10, 11-year-old student who can write that, you'd be happy, wouldn't you? Yeah. And again, don't feel a sense of despair. Oh, my student could never do that. Again, this is 2 to 3 or more years of practicing the structure and style system. So that essay would fall right into this category. Not really much of an opinion, not anything really controversial, but a little trickier than some of those easier things. We have got a lot of samples in here. I don't have time to read them. I would love to. If you're enamored with the idea of a super essay, check page 133, and you will actually see a 3-essay super essay, or what I kind of humorously called the super duper essay. And this shows Thomas Jefferson. You divide Jefferson into three areas. He was a statesman, he was a president, and he was an inventor, right? And you write a whole essay about Jefferson the statesman, another whole essay about Jefferson the president, and another whole essay about Jefferson the inventor, which means you need 3 or more topics for each of those. So you see the topics. As a statesman, he wrote the Declaration of Independence. He helped secure aid from France during the American War for Independence, and he served as vice president under John Adams, although they disagreed on so many things. Then in the conclusion, you would restate those topics and amplify one of them and say the most significant thing he did was help prove that playing a musical instrument helps you overcome writer's block, because he was kind of stuck writing the Declaration of Independence, and he got his violin and he played a bit, and out came the wonderful "when in the course of human events." Now, Jefferson as a president, that's a whole different essay. So what are some things he did? Well, he did the Louisiana Purchase. People thought he was crazy, but it was the best real estate deal in all of history. He sent out Lewis and Clark, which was really helpful because it gave so many street names to places in Washington and Idaho. And he failed, unfortunately, to defeat Alexander Hamilton's central banking scheme. And then if you look at the most important thing that happened in his presidency, indeed was his failure to defeat the central banking scheme, because that later gave birth to the Federal Reserve, central banking, the inflation in currency, and the future economic collapse of the world. Next essay, Jefferson the inventor. What are some things he did or did not invent? Well, people believe he invented the four-sided music stand, and you could describe that in stunning detail. He also had this amazing letter duplicating machine, so he could copy every letter that he wrote. It would write what he was writing, and he could keep a copy of his correspondence. Pretty clever, eh? And a lot of people think he invented the dumbwaiter, which is the precursor of the elevator, but not so. Almost all these things he simply stole from France and brought them over and introduced them to the colonies and the states. So I'm being a little funny just to keep you awake, but that's the schematic. Do you see? So you could easily just take this thing, this diagram, reproduce it, and say, okay, guys, this is how we're going to write a 17-paragraph composition. 3 divisions, 3 topics in each division, plan it out, and once you've got the schematic, guess what? You don't have one great huge long thing. You just have 17 short little things, right? And so even a great huge long thing is a combination. There is an example of a very, very well done persuasive essay on the next page. Super essay. And I think it has a persuasive element to it as well, on pesticides and the history of pesticides, and a very extensive bibliography at the end. And I should just kind of finish this up by mentioning the documentation idea, right? Because this is what kids come up against, and it's actually pretty nasty. My son-in-law graduated from Biola University with a degree in Bible and theology, and he told me, he said, it takes me as long to format the paper to the satisfaction of the style guide as it does to just write the paper in the first place. I mean, there seems to be something a bit wrong when that's the case. But it is a big deal in most of the high schools, the better high schools, the colleges. And the problem is it's not as though there's just one way to do it. There's MLA. There's APA. There's still, in some disciplines, Chicago or Turabian. There's MLA Social Sciences, MLA Pure Science. It's so crazy and confusing. So I'm not at all going to attempt to teach you how to do any of that. But I do want to make a couple observations. First observation is, I think the reason it's such a problem is because we tend to dump it on the students all at once. One day, you're a happy, carefree, innocent 13-year-old living your life and having a wonderful time. And the very next day, ka-wham! Full MLA format on the paper, citations, documentation, inline all at once. It's too much. That's not our style. We don't like dumping things on people all at once. What's our style? Easy plus one thing at a time. So when you go about teaching your students documentation, try to break it into steps and phases, right? Phase 1, just put a bibliography at the bottom and say where you got your information. That's all you have to do, right? Step 2, make a quotation of some sort. Choose a quotation from one of your sources, put it in somewhere in that paper, and show them how to do it. The inline citation right now is more common than the footnote, right? So Boone, comma, 231 or whatever. You teach them how to do that. And then you can add to that the idea of block quotations, where you're saying something that's more than 3 lines long. So rather than using quotation marks, use a colon, indent, and you have a block quotation. And then you can get to the idea of paraphrasing. And I like to go so far as to suggest that you can also show students how to do informational footnotes, where they can add a bit of information that it would be off topic, but is interesting to the reader. You see? So make a little pathway for yourself. We do have some resources that make our life easier in this regard. There are websites like Purdue's Online Writing Lab that have the whole MLA format accessible. You can go and, oh, okay, I have a periodical article written by 2 people. How do I format that? You can go find out. Also, there are some online databases that will do your formatting for you. EasyBib is one. MyBib, I think, is out there. There's probably going to be a few others. You just type in the ISBN number of the book, and boom, they'll send you the citation, just like that. Or you type in all the details, and they'll send you a document with it formatted, so you don't have to spend so much time poring over this type of thing. And it always changes, doesn't it? The MLA format for certain things changes every year. Right now, the biggest change is how you cite websites, which is probably the most common thing that you have to cite these days. So it's good to have the current MLA handbook, or be a member and you get access to the MLA website. But I would just say this: don't feel as though you have to send your kids off to college knowing everything about documentation and citation. If they just go off knowing something about how to do it, and then remind them, follow the style guide from the class, from the department, follow it slavishly, they'll be fine. They'll be fine. I am still partial myself towards the Turabian or the Chicago, with the little tiny footnote, and then the end, or the little tiny number, and then the end note. Because I do not like seeing, Brown, comma, 241 in the middle of my sentence. It disturbs me. But who am I? I am a simple man. There's another great example here on page 142 of a compare-contrast essay by a high school level student. So again, we've tried to provide samples at all different levels, elementary, middle, high, so that you can get a sense of what some of our teachers and students have done, and what you can hope to strive for yourself. So, page 144, 145, here's the instructions for your practicum. We're going to make it easy for you. This doesn't have to be a great, eloquent essay. You've already got 3 paragraphs on elephants done. You just kind of put in a conclusion, put in an introduction, put it all together in one piece. Follow the checklist, be sure you've got everything in there you need, and send it on in if you like to. And you'll learn something from doing that as well. Okay, do we have any questions about anything pertaining to Unit 8 and essays? Yes, in the back there.
Okay, I am totally on board with the topic and clincher statement idea. I do it, I love it, is logical. I still have this maybe tiny little black cloud still remaining, and that's the transitional sense.
Transitions. Excellent.
Is there a place for it anymore?
Yes.
And what's your philosophy on transitional sentences?
I am so glad you asked that question. Because, yes, and a lot of writing books and teachers will stress this idea of making a smooth transition from one topic to the next. First thing I'll say is I would rather have choppy but clearly on-topic paragraphs than a bunch of things that are mushed together with indentations and you don't know why. So I would err on the side of just sticking with the topic clincher and not worrying about it until you're really solid on that. But at some point, maybe second year or third year or with your advanced students, you can teach the idea of a transitional clincher or a transitional topic sentence. This is, again, a technical way to implement that idea, right? How can you know that you did it? Well, here would be a transitional clincher. This clincher, right here, will repeat or reflect what? 2 to 3 keywords of its topic. But a transitional clincher would do that and probably reflect or hint at 1 or 2 words of the next topic, right? So in this case, you might say, while the janitorial concerns regarding gum are still debatable, much more is known about the effect on attention, right? Now, many people consider gum chewing a distraction, the clicking, popping sounds. However, other people claim that chewing gums helps them concentrate better, right? So you're going to maybe one word tell what's coming next. Do you see that? That's probably the most effective transition, but you can also do it kind of the other way. This topic sentence, right, is going to have 2 or 3 words that connect with this clincher, right? But this could also have 1 or 2 words that it pulls from the previous clincher. Now, obviously, the danger in this is being redundant and having word repeat. The only way to avoid the word repeat is to have a thesaurus and use it. Because when you're repeating the word too close to each other, it's not going to sound good. But it does make kind of a technical way to teach that idea of transitions between paragraphs. Do you like that idea? Don't bother with it first year. Wait until your students are solid and you can refine the thing. It's so easy for us, and particularly easy for those of us that have been doing this for a long time, to just dump everything on people all at once and think that they're just going to get it, forgetting what it was like to not know, forgetting that more gradual would have been easier or better. So always keep that in mind. I know I went to a school once, and I was very impressed with this school. A lot of progressive, innovative ideas there. And one of the things that the school did was it paid for each teacher to take a college or university class, one semester class, each year in something they had never studied before. That was one of the qualifications to work at this school, because the administration wanted every teacher to constantly be reminded, what is it like to learn something completely new? A language or a musical instrument or an art or a subject, right? Such a good thing to keep in mind, that freshness. Any more question about Unit 8 or anything we've talked about? Thelma, you are loaded with good questions.
Okay, I'm just a little fuzzy on the topic, the 3 topics in the intro and the thesis statement. Do you use those together in the literary analysis?
Yes, they will. Okay. The thesis statement is the statement that you're going to try to prove, right? That is what you're going to try to prove. So if I want to try and prove that the Apollo space program was an investment of money that brought value beyond its cost, okay, that would give me focus, wouldn't it? Then I would be looking for topics that would support that thesis. Okay? So I would probably look at 3 scientific developments or medical developments or something that came out of the Apollo space program. Okay? If I wanted to prove that the United States was headed for a hyperinflation, that would be more kind of an issue, right? Then I would claim that. The United States is headed for a hyperinflation, and I would go look for historical or economic evidence, topics. So Zimbabwe might be a good one, right? I don't know. I could also prove the United States is headed for a great deflation, and I'd choose different topics to choose that. Or I might say the United States is a strong, healthy economy that's going to persevere for the next 3 decades. And I would look for evidence to support that, you see? So that's where those come in. And I think some of the essay samples, if you read them, you'll detect, that's a thesis statement. And we'll get more into that with the literature. One more question. Okay, that'll be it, and then we'll take a break.
My question is from the binder on page 110.
Okay.
It says in grades, adjusting for grade level, grade 6 to 12. It says teach the TRIAC model. I got the topic on the clincher. What is the RINA?
The TRIAC, very astute of you to notice that. It's kind of an advanced idea, but it's a tremendously useful tool once you have the basics of structure and style. So I kind of don't think of it as something I want to tell you and you'll run off and try to teach it to everybody first thing. But again, 2nd year, 3rd year, working through, it would be applicable really in Unit 7 or 8, or perhaps some of the literary analysis stuff. It's a way to organize details. So we have kind of given a paragraph model which is very simplistic, right? So going back to Unit 4, Unit 7. Topic, sentence. Certain number of details. Clincher. And we really haven't talked much about organizing details because there's such a diversity of things you might need to do, right, with those. In fact, I have a friend, Vic Pellegrino, who wrote a book, which you can buy from us if you like. It's called A Writer's Guide to Powerful Paragraphs. And in this book, Dr. Pellegrino identifies 30 different ways to organize details inside a paragraph. Things like specific to general, general to specific, chronological analysis, spatial analysis, compare, contrast, compare and contrast. It goes on. 30 ways. And of course, you could buy this book. You could study all 30 of these models. You could practice writing multiple paragraphs of all these 30 models, and you could do that. And that would be kind of the equivalent of going to Home Depot, buying a very large and expensive toolbox, buying 30 very large and expensive tools and putting them in this toolbox and carrying around it with you wherever you go. Some people need to do that, right? I do not. I don't use tools. I really don't. I mean, if I cannot accomplish it with a Swiss Army knife and a hammer, I don't even try. It's not worth my time. I'm completely incompetent. But I do like that Swiss Army knife because there are little things I can do, like tighten a screw or open a bottle or cut my fingernails. Important things. So the TRIAC is kind of like the Swiss Army knife, kind of like the Leatherman tool of paragraph models. It's very versatile. It'll do lots of organizing for you, but it won't solve every problem. But it's a good one to have. And the way it works is T stands for topic. R stands for restriction, or you narrow something ever so slightly. I stands for illustration, or maybe information, illustration. And A stands for analysis. What's the significance? What are the impacts? What's the value? What's the meaning, right? And then C stands for clincher. So topic, restriction, information, analysis, clincher, and there's 5 parts. Now they're not 5 equal parts because the topic and restriction are probably very short. The illustration and analysis are the big parts, right? And then the clincher is going to be pretty short. So let's say I was writing a little composition about the Heinz family, and Betsy is the mom, right? And are you a homeschooling mom? I am. Okay, so I would write 1 paragraph, that's all I have space for, about Betsy, right? So by the TRIAC model, it might go something like this. Betsy Heinz is an extremely devoted homeschool parent, right? Now, that's a big subject, right? So we want to narrow it down, give it some direction, right? She is particularly enthusiastic about teaching her children science. Now we know where we're going with this. We see some direction. The restriction drives the content, do you see? Now I need a few illustrations. She frequently can be found staying up until 1 or 2 in the morning, preparing fascinating kitchen science experiments, poring over the books that teach her how to do that. Furthermore, she has ordered a chemistry set and an electrics set and a physics set for each one of her 7 children. She gets so excited about science that she makes a video of the experiments her children are doing, and they write marvelous reports to show their understanding of their lessons. Okay, this is just all fiction, I know, but okay, now that's the illustration. Have I kind of proved my point? Okay, now we have an analysis, and we'll say something like, clearly, Betsy's children are learning well elements of the scientific method, falling in love with chemicals and electricity and what else can you follow? Pendulums, trying to think of a physics thing there, pendulums. And it is very likely that all of her hard work will gain 1 or more of her children a full scholarship to MIT in the future. Clearly we see Betsy is an extremely dedicated homeschool parent. Do you see? So I'm sorry for picking on you. You're okay with that. But the idea then would be, you could take any subject in any topic in the world, probably, and spin it out if you followed this pattern. Topic, restriction, narrow a little bit, give some information, illustration. They always say show, don't tell, so paint the picture. Analysis, what's the significance, value, impact, meaning, and clincher. So that's the TRIAC model. And again, I would not try to teach this to someone until you've been kind of working through all of our basic stuff for quite a while, and then you can refine it, much like that transitional clincher idea. Good. Okay, we're going to take a break and then come in for the home stretch, Unit 9, critiques, and the writing about literature. So stretch out, and we'll see you in a few minutes.